found the questions. Okay, we're live now. So good morning, everyone, or afternoon or day, and welcome to another Nomad Office Hours. And today I'm hosting. My name's Jackie Grinrod, and I'm one of the developer advocates. And I just heard myself start talking, so I don't want that, but needing that. And I'm here with Chris Baker and Seth Honig from the Nomad team. If you just want to introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Seth.
Hi, Chris.
Introduce yourself, Seth.
Oh, I'm Seth. Yes. Nice to have everyone here.
Yep, and I'm Chris. I'm the lead engineer on the Nomad ecosystem team.
Awesome.
That's it.
Okay. we're having one of those mornings, but that is totally okay.
I think we all just woke up, so it's
it's the post Canada Day, pre-Independence Day live stream.
Yeah, and post HashiConf. So there's been a lot going on. That's really fun and exciting. And I guess speaking of HashiConf, I was thinking of, before we go into some of the questions that we have submitted, just kind of a quick recap of what we did announce at HashiConf, if anyone wants to go first.
Yeah, so HashiConf was great. So Nomad 0.12. This is the first community office hour since Nomad 0.12, right? Since the announcement?
I think so.
So the question list should probably have a whole ton of stuff like that. So Nomad 0.12 is a gigantic release of Nomad. I don't think there was a single person on the Nomad team who wasn't doing some major feature, tentpole feature for 0.12. So multi-cluster deployment, multi-region deployment. We've got just a ton of new support for networking and Connect. There is what else is there, Seth? I'd have to pull the list up. There were like 16 features in the announcement email, I think.
Oh yeah, there's like new monitoring stuff, scaling stuff. Global search in the docs is awesome. There's some snapshotting stuff. CNI integration, multi-interface networking, Connect native support. It's a big release.
Yeah.
Preemption is now an open source feature.
Yeah, a lot of people have been asking for that for a while, so it's nice. It felt real good to be able to move that one over to open source. So do we want to go ahead and start handling some of the questions, Jackie?
Yeah, sure. I was just moving the last few over because there's a lot today to start with, which is exciting. But I think the very first one we had submitted was, what's the best way to make sure that my Nomad config is valid?
Is it job config or server config?
It's a good question. It just says config.
Well, I'm going to take the easy one first and assume that it's job config, in which case there is actually a special endpoint in Nomad called validate, which will tell you whether the job that you're trying to run is valid or not. I'm pulling up the CLI, but I know there's an API endpoint for job validate, and I'm pretty sure there is actually a command for job validate as well. So if you're using job validate, Nomad job validate is the command. So you just give it the HCL file, and it actually, I think it actually sends it off to the server, and the server will do the validation there. So it does as much validation as it possibly can, looking to see whether it's, now your job may be valid in the sense that Nomad knows and understands what you're telling it to do and is able to do what you're telling it to do. It may not be valid in the sense that your job is actually going to successfully run. It can't look at your Docker image and know that you're passing it the right command. So at a certain point in time, you do have to run it and see what happens.
I've got a question. What's the difference between the validate endpoint and doing something like a job plan?
I think plan actually has some interaction. It invokes the schedule in a dry run mode. So you can actually figure out, for example, if you want to make sure that you have allocations that are already running. So you're doing a job update. You have allocations that are already running and you want to see whether they're going to be destroyed and recreated on a different node, or whether it's actually some change that will allow the allocations to just be restarted in place. So plan will actually give you some of that ability. Whereas validate is really just strictly, we're going to parse the job and find out whether or not it's a valid job or not. So it doesn't interact with the scheduler at all. And plan has some amount of interaction with the scheduler. It doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't tell you, for example, where allocations are going to be placed. It doesn't do a full scheduling run, although there have been discussions about maybe doing that. That we've been actually asking for on the ecosystem team to support, cluster auto scaling type stuff, right? If I need to kill a node, where all the allocations are going to go, is there room for it, that sort of stuff. But yeah, but it does.
We like to say, pull requests welcome.
Yeah, right. So
I guess to answer the question for agent config, whether you're talking about client or server, I don't think we really have a great answer for that yet. I always use Hickelfunct, which is just the HCL linter. I write all my configs in HCL, and then it catches like 90% of the bugs. It doesn't catch any of the logical bugs that you might have, which is only interpreted by the actual code that's loading the config. I think in the future, we're planning to migrate to HCL2, which includes better support for kind of a schema, yeah. Which would make it think a lot easier to build a tool that would actually validate the correctness of your config. But that doesn't exist yet, and it's more like a Nomad 1.0 beyond kind of thing.
So invalid config, though, is sort of like what you have with any of the other problems you could have with an application deployment or something like that, is that you can try to make sure that your config is valid, but at the end of the day, the better strategy is to, perfection is a what's the word I'm looking for? An anti-pattern, right? Running through failure is the thing you want to be going after. So, don't update all of your servers at the same time, right? If you're running Nomad in a highly available configuration, which you almost certainly should be, right? If you update one of the servers and it has an invalid config, this is going to keep the server from actually running. It's going to let you know, and you're going to be down one server, but you still have two other servers. Your Nomad cluster is still up and running, it's still taking commands, it's still scheduling. So that's actually one way to find out. Similarly with the clients, if you restart your Nomad client with new config and you've just got some mistake in the config that's keeping from coming up right, your jobs on those clients are still running. Nomad is built to be able to survive through failures, including failures caused by bad config. So, depending on how you mess up the config, bad config is not necessarily the end of the world. There's probably things you can do which are bad, like changing the data directory to something that is not where it was before. But there are a large class of config failures, even the schema ones or the bad HCL ones that are you're just going to keep the server or the client from coming back up again. And as a general rule, that's something that we expect and are ready for. New question.
Well, on the topic of things failing, the next question that we had in the queue was, how do I quickly determine when a job started failing? Is it in the CLI or in the UI, or possibly both ways of, I added the is it, but.
Yeah, this is a fun one because it's like if you go on vacation, like a long vacation, like, maybe to the International Space Station or something, and you come back 6 months later and you look at your Nomad cluster and see that one of your jobs is failing, and maybe it started failing 6 months ago. One of the things that you'll often run into with Nomad is that in order for Nomad to scale the way that it scales, we occasionally have to be somewhat aggressive with getting rid of history. We're not a application performance metrics tool like Prometheus. So one of the things you always have to deal with is whether the information you need is actually in Nomad. And things that happened a long time ago, and a long time ago sometimes means a long time ago in terms of time, and sometimes it means a long time ago in terms of all the things that Nomad is doing. So on a very, very, very large Nomad cluster, for example, with thousands or tens of thousands of jobs that are doing stuff all the time, a lot of batch jobs that are creating allocations, they're dying, they're being garbage collected, that sort of stuff. It may not actually be possible in Nomad to figure out when something happened historically. So the first thing is you may, the answer to this may be no, we can't tell you because the history of that may have gone away, right? You can look at a job that's been failing and you can see the job summary. That doesn't get garbage collected. And you'll see that there are a large number of failed allocations. So that's the easiest way, just Nomad job status. Nomad job status and the name of the job. And if you see that there's a large number of failed allocations that weren't there before, something's been going on. If you want to find out when that was happening though, the allocations associated with that job, if it was significantly long ago, depending on what long means, right? Whether it's number of allocations, amount of time, whatever. Those allocations may not be around anymore and you may not have all the information. The evaluations associated with those allocations. Evaluation is what happens when Nomad does the scheduling. So if your allocations fail after a certain amount of time, your restart or reschedule stanzas will cause a new scheduling to happen. A new allocation will be created on a different node under the premise that maybe there was something wrong with the node that you were on. There's an evaluation is the actual scheduling action, right? Those get garbage collected as well. So really the best answer to that is to look at the monitoring tool that you're using if you're using something like Prometheus, because its job is to have all of that historical information. And you can look at you can have things set up to track the failed allocations, for a particular job, the failed allocations overall, that sort of stuff. But in the short term, you can just look at Nomad job status. If the easy answer is Nomad job status or look inside of the UI, both places will show you right up front for a particular job, they'll show you the number of failed allocations. In the UI, it's almost too obvious because you'll see if it's happened a lot, say you've been trying to get a job into a new job, right? You're trying to get it working and you keep trying to figure out the right Docker command or something like that. All of those allocations are fail and they stay there in the UI until garbage collection. With that big red part of the bar, and then you'll have the little green part for the running ones, right? So it's a little misleading. It makes it look like there's something wrong with the job. That's just the history. So, but if you go into job status or in the UI or Nomad job status on the CLI, you'll see the job summary will tell you just the historical number of allocations that have failed. And if those allocations are still around, both the CLI and the UI will let you go look at those allocations. And they all have a timestamp on them. The evaluations have timestamps on them. Yes, you should be able to see when it failed.
So Chris, do you think Nomad could at some point add support for structured event logging so that you could externalize like all the events that emit out of Nomad into some system that you could then diagnose later?
Yeah, so the first answer is that's something we're talking about right now. That's something we're looking at because it is the official support for that doesn't exist right now. So the ability to get Nomad to put out an event stream, especially a customizable event stream, is something that we've been talking about for a while and are hoping to do, in the near future. The other answer to that is that there are tools out there. It's called Nomad Firehose, which I think actually the way it works is it connects as a non-voting Raft member. So it gets all of the updates it's a fake server effectively. It gets all of the updates that the servers pass around to each other and then emits those as sort of an externally third-party, non-supported, so it's occasionally actually, abusive.
It's emitting like the actual Raft events?
Well, I think it doesn't emit all of them, but what it does is it emits I've never used it before, but I've seen customers use it.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it. This is kind of interesting. I'll go look at it later.
Yeah, no, it connects and then it gets all the updates from the server, so it knows what's happening in the cluster. And as a result of that, you can tailor it. And of course, it's an open source tool, so you can hack it to do whatever you like. And then the third answer is that the Nomad API supports blocking queries. So for a lot of different things, if there's a particular type of event that you're interested in, you can use the blocking queries in the API. If I just want to know when jobs are registered, I can monitor the jobs endpoint and use it as a blocking query. And what happens every time a new job is registered, the index will advance and Nomad will return the answer to the query. Until that happens, it doesn't. So I don't have to sit there and short poll. I can do long poll instead. That's not a true event stream because it's possible that you'll miss stuff that happened in between, A and C, in fact. So it's not an event stream if you're looking for something like auditing, but that's why we have we have auditing in Enterprise Nomad now as well. So and we're going to be building on that capability going forward for Enterprise and for open source.
It sounds like we might have touched on this one a bit too, but one of the next questions coming up was, in the Nomad UI, is there a way to surface timestamps and duration of running jobs in a more global view?
Yeah, so there's we do a RFC driven process across the entire company. When you're making any non-trivial change to any of the products, you'll send out an RFC, a request for comment, that goes out to the entire company, where you pretty much describe what it is you're planning on doing as you understand it at the time anyway. And one of the RFCs that I saw come out, probably a month ago, was from the UI team on the Nomad team. And it was addressing this exact thing. The Nomad scheduler is doing a lot, right? And there are some places in the UI, if you're trying to get exactly this type of information, where, I mean, drilling down is almost an understatement. There, where from the front page to the actual information that you want can be 5 or 6 clicks. And one of the things that we're looking at doing, that the UI team is working on right now and researching, is how to restructure the UI to be able to give people, different types of people in different roles, the information that they want to see. And like the cluster operator just wants to know whether there's something wrong with the cluster, right? But the person who's working on a particular job just cares about that particular job. And just giving people the ability to have, these dashboards or these experiences with the Nomad UI that make it easy for them to see at a general glance whether everything's okay, what's happening. And then when they need to get the specific information, like, a failing allocation, something's going on wrong, I don't want to have to click through 15 things to be able to find the timestamp of what happened with that allocation to see its logs. Whether we can surface some of that information so it doesn't take 3, 4, 5, 6 clicks to do it. So that is an active, ongoing effort that hopefully will be coming out in the next release or two. I hope I'm not giving away any secrets. Seth, we need a signal. If I start talking about confidential stuff, yeah, that'll work.
No. Okay. I was just about to say, I feel that, but some of these questions also have attached GitHub issues with them, which I haven't in the past gone through on office hours. So I was like, hey, do you want me to send you the GitHub issue that was attached, or? I don't know how to set
Are you
up,
talking
so.
about 4263?
Yes.
When I'm looking over here, I'm looking at the questions in Slack and the GitHub issues. So I'm not. If I start doing this, it's because I'm leaving. But otherwise, batch job UI timestamps and duration. This is a bug filed by an internal, by Jack. Yeah, so this is good. This is good. Let's do this on air. So suggestion to add some information to the UI for batch jobs. One of my questions when on the UI jobs, when a batch job, is how long has this been running, or when did this start? Right. So yeah, there's a lot of things around. There's just a lot of stuff around batch jobs that are going to be getting some love going forward. For example, batch jobs, there are certain things you want with batch jobs that you don't want with system jobs that we don't support. And this is well known to us. These sort of requests are old enough that they don't exist in GitHub. They actually exist multiple times in GitHub. So there's like 3 versions of the same feature request. But one of them is stuff like this around batch job operation. How long has this been running? How do I find out this information without having to dig down and look at the allocations, go in, look at the evaluations. The evaluations, by the way, will still exist for this. So you can see the allocation, you can see the evaluation for the allocation, you can see when it was created, or you can look at the timestamps for the allocation, the events, that is the events on that particular allocation. This stuff can be made a little easier. We can surface these things, and that's part of the stuff that the UI team is working on right now, trying to figure out how to do this. The other one is, around batch jobs is, for example, people have often wanted, all the weird, quirky things about a batch job. A service job, you want it to run forever until you tell it to stop. A batch job, you want it to run until it's finished, or maybe 5 minutes if it hasn't finished by then, because something's obviously wrong. So there's just a lot of these little weird things about batch jobs that we're working on, that we're going to be adding support for, giving a little bit of love as we move towards 1.0. 1.0 is the big fix all of the annoying things that people have been asking for 6 years. so a lot of these things are things that we're really trying to put some focus on for 1.0.
I'm noticing we have a lot of UI questions. I'm sorry, Seth, there's not as much connect.
It's fine with me. Huh?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So next one I'm going to ask is, as the artifact stanza uses the OS binaries, will Nomad get fingerprinting for OS binary versions, such as a get issue that was referred? So I got the link and I added it there too. It's issue 6710.
Artifact stanza uses the OS binaries. Let me look at this just to make sure I understand.
Oh, I see. Well, the artifact stanza uses. Let me make sure I actually understand this.
Okay, cool. So allow Nomad agent to allow. Well, so the issue linked there is 6710, right?
Seeing it's a feature request.
Yes, it is a feature request. So Nomad fingerprints, allow Nomad agent to fingerprint the version of binaries. So add binary version when the agent is fingerprinting the system. Say OS, this can possibly use in a job constraint. Well, the easy answer to that question is this is actually possible using a plugin. So you could actually put a plugin, probably not a task driver plugin, but you could set this up as a device plugin, or maybe even a task driver plugin. That might be the easiest way to do it, just a fake plugin. This is a bit of a hack, but a fake plugin, you know, we do this with Java, for example, and then the Python one that I wrote for Virtual Day. All of the task driver plugins have the ability to, you know, fingerprint the system, figure out what's going on, and then return information metadata back to Nomad that can be used for scheduling using constraints or affinities or whatever, right? So the short answer is that there is a plugin system that can be abused to get this sort of information. And I know our community is all about pushing the envelope for what can be done with Nomad. So that's the short answer. The long answer is that currently the fingerprinting that is done by the clients when they start up consists of exactly that. The built-in hard-coded fingerprints that the clients do, which you can't really touch without hacking on Nomad, or task driver and device driver fingerprinting. So there's an argument being made then that maybe we should support additional types of fingerprinting instead of going in and doing these one-off sorts of things to figure out which gets on there. We could actually just go ahead and add additional plugins for just straight up client fingerprinting for this information.
It might get a little interesting if the things you're fingerprinting don't support like a common -- version or Simver syntax.
I was sort of imagining as a new plugin system, right? Just a fingerprint plugin where
So
it just
bring
runs.
your own. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could if you did that, we could provide a default like GNU core
run a command one.
implementation. Yeah.
Yeah. Run a command, return a map sort of thing.
That'd be kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So that's neat. Yeah. Cool. Good question, as usual, from Shantanu.
Yeah.
What else do we got?
Okay, the next one coming up is, in the UI, is there a way to surface or filter currently running jobs in a more global view? There's too much drilling down right now, and I'm looking for more of a real-time dashboard.
Yeah, that's sort of the question that I must have read them out of order. That's the question I was answering earlier about the UI. So we're working on doing that. There's, you know, just the different views for different personas to make it easy to find the stuff that you want to find without having to click 4, 5, 6 times. So
heard the drilling down earlier, and I was like, I wonder if this is this question too.
Yep, that's what I did. I'm lost. It's early.
Multi-answers for multi-questions. It's, you know. All right, so then the next one was, is there a way to enable or disable jobs from the UI? My current workaround is to edit job spec, although this is not realistic at scale. the job is disabled icon request?
So I'm curious what the scale is they're talking about. If you're talking about just that's too much work and I don't want to do that, that's fine. So the O.12 UI will have support for Nomad to support horizontal auto scaling of applications. We added new endpoints into Nomad that are explicitly for scaling. So you can actually, instead of having to, if you've used Hashi UI has these scale up and down buttons for the task groups. All that does is actually update the job spec for you and send it back in. Nomad actually has a specific scaling endpoint now for you to go to a job and just say, I want to change that task group to 7. And it's not requiring you to pull the job, update it, and then push the job again. It actually just says, send that to 7, send that to 3, send that to 0. So if you want to disable a job, you could do that by, in fact, just scaling it to 0. I don't know what disable the job means. If that's stop a batch job. Stop and if stop and disable are two different things, then you can disable the job by scaling the running instances down to 0. If stop and disable are what they're talking about, then there is a stop button in the UI, right? And if the question is about, well, how do I stop jobs at scale? Like I'd like to be able to select multiple jobs and then hit stop and stop all of them. Then the answer to that one is feature request. File a GitHub issue and ask, and then I'll let the UI people say whether they hate that or love that idea. I've already promised probably way too much from the UI team in the past 27
Well, they're not
minutes,
here to defend themselves, so
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm sure.
Quiet.
Yeah, I'm sure they're on YouTube probably watching and hating.
Watching and shaking
anyway.
their heads like, oh no.
That's good. If I promise too much stuff, maybe I'll get a break from community office hours. They won't let me come on air anymore. So, yeah.
But you're so
but
great on air. You have all the answers and all the thoughts.
Yeah, I make up, if I don't have the answer, I make up the answer. That's, Seth is supposed to, is this what? So anyway.
Sounds good to me, huh?
Yeah, whatever. These are important things. I mean, the UI, I love using the UI. When I do demos, I try to always use the UI because it's beautiful UI. It's better for demos, but it's just easier to do things in the UI. There's less chance of making mistakes. But that just means that the UI is important, the interaction that people have. Everybody understands, the UI team understands this, how important it is, the user experience when they're using the UI, and they work on this all the time. So if you have these sorts of things, and they're not already captured as GitHub issues, absolutely 100% file them as a GitHub issue, because like as on the drive towards 1.0, towards the maturity milestone of Nomad, we're really trying to work on handling all of these long-standing things that are frustrations that every single Nomad user experiences every single day, but don't quite elevate towards a major feature in one of the previous releases. This is our moment to take care of those things. So this is the time to file this. I mean, we obviously can do it later as well, but this is one of the things that we're really pushing for, is taking care of these just these rough edges that impact a large number of people in a small way. This is the time to fix those. So quick, new question.
I was just unmuting to ask the next one. So the next one is about logs. And the question is, can I wire up Nomad to click through to a log aggregator like Sumo Logic? Better options for viewing logs in UI?
Click through. Yeah. Have you ever worked on a product before where you had to implement something like click through, Seth?
Maybe.
Yeah, I've worked at companies before in the past where the enterprise users they have this stuff, right? They're using Prometheus for that. Maybe they have some in-house stuff. Maybe you have a self-service portal, right, that's sitting in front of Nomad that you're using to register your Nomad job. I want to go in, I'm going to fill out some information. It's ultimately going to create a Nomad job. I wrote the self-service portal, so I can add a link to go into Nomad's UI. But once I get into Nomad UI, it's a dead end, right? I'm in there and I don't have the ability to get back out. Even if I were to put metadata, for example, I can put metadata on the job that says, here's the link in Prometheus, right? Here's the link in my self-service portal. I put this on the job when I created. I'd like to be able to have the Nomad UI, which is part of a larger integrated system that maybe I've built and customized. I want to have the ability to get out of the Nomad UI back into that other stuff. So I need this click through, click out. I can't remember what we used to call it in our product. Anyway, but the ability to put these links into the UI and be able to get out of them. So I don't know the easy answer to that. I think if you put something like metadata on a Nomad job that has a URL inside of it, the UI, I believe, renders the metadata for the job. Sorry, it displays the metadata for the job, but I don't think it renders it as, clickable sort of stuff. So, maybe that would be something that could be done. That could be something that could be asked for. Maybe that deserves a special field. We don't really like adding new fields to the job UI, especially if there's an existing field like metadata that could handle that. So job meta can have these sorts of links in there. At the same time, job meta, if you update the job meta, it'll update all your allocations, and you don't really want that either. So there's long been a discussion about adding a field where you could put information about the job, but that doesn't actually cause the job to be rerun, right? Something that's not subject to interpolation, just tags on the job. And maybe that would be a good place for putting something like that, and the UI could support, rendering those. I think this is a great sort of thing. If you wanted to make it as pretty as possible, it'd require real effort between the UI team and a sort of a standard way of presenting these sorts of things. Do you want icons on them? Do you want description? Is it just enough to put a URL and have the UI automatically render those as hrefs or as anchor tags, I mean. So yeah, I think that's certainly something worth talking about. Again, file an issue against the UI team. They're great.
This sounds like we started wandering close to the next question here too. So the next one is,
that one?
Sorry?
Yeah, go on.
No problem. Is adding a plugin based model for the UI possible so that community can extend capabilities as needed?
I'm gonna let Seth answer that question.
Oh man. Yeah, file ticket, I don't know.
I don't know how to answer a question that says UI and possible. So
is anything is possible.
Yeah, right. That's what backend engineers say. We say, yeah, the UI can do anything. The front end, sure, it's JavaScript. JavaScript can do anything, right? Yeah, I don't know about UI plugins. That's funny because yeah, that's really funny.
I don't think we've ever even kind of discussed this before.
The UI is, I haven't seen this discussion come up. I'd like to see you follow this issue. I'd like to see the heads explode in the on the UI team when they
actually. What I'd really like to know is what the extra capabilities are that you would want to add. That wouldn't make sense to just bake in from the get-go.
Yeah,
I was wondering that too.
Yeah, so let's just talk about plugins for a second. Plugins for Nomad. Nomad server doesn't have plugins yet. Nomad client does have plugins. You have task driver plugins that you explicitly put on there and the client loads them up, and you have device plugins that you explicitly put on there and it loads them up. And then we also have CSI plugins, and we have CNI plugins now, right, Seth?
Yep.
And those are sort of, those have a community interface, a community defined interface, and they get loaded up in a different sort of way. So I'm going to sort of ignore those for right now. But if you were to imagine something like the UI, so the UI gets built, the Nomad UI is actually built in the Nomad binary. When we build Nomad, we build the actual UI and we put it there inside of the same binary so that it can be served up by the same thing. So the Nomad binary is the CLI, it's the server, it's the client, it's the web server, and it also is a web server that serves up the UI, right? And so I just wonder what it would look like to have that web server load up. I don't know anything about a pluggable UI, but that's sort of an interesting model that I would have some plugin that I would put, do I put it there? Do I register it with the server so that it knows, it just needs to render out a little spot here and pull that information from some, I don't even know what a UI plugin would look like, some JavaScript file over on another web server. That's a sort of interesting idea. I'd be curious to see, because it seems like there'd be a number of different ways. Do you actually want to have to deploy this on your Nomad your Nomad, because on your Nomad clients, you have to deploy the task driver and the device plugin on every Nomad client where you want that plugin to be running, right? So, is this something that you have to deploy alongside Nomad on every single server? Because the Nomad clients and servers are both UI servers. They both serve up the UI. So do you have to deploy this alongside of it, or does it get fetched? Does it get pulled in by your browser as instructed by the UI's plugin system? That's a good question. I'd like to see the UI team answer that question in a GitHub issue. It's another RFC for another day.
That's true. Yeah, I very, very briefly supported a product that I say briefly. It wasn't brief. It was more that like my direct involvement was not so direct because like ops view, but it was like a plug and play UI builder that you could drag and drop stuff and it would build out the infrastructure. And it's not quite the same as Nomad, but it was such a fascinating concept to me, and like the idea of being able to do that in something like a dashboard for Nomad sounds really cool too. So
did it work?
Yeah. This was quite a few years ago. It worked pretty well for then, and it was that. Yeah, I don't actually know what I can say publicly about it, but yeah, it worked pretty well, and yeah.
Well, if you've seen any of the recent demos about so for example, some of the auto scaling demos rely heavily on Prometheus. So that's where we get the information for auto scaling is an APM, and Prometheus is the main one we're using right now. When, for example, James during HashiConf is using, running this demo, he's going into the Prometheus dashboard, and it just turns into I'm going to spend a week writing my talk, and then I'm going to spend a week, getting the demo working, right? And then I'm going to spend 2 weeks making this Prometheus dashboard look as absolutely gorgeous. It just turns into this game of golf, right? Like, how much can I tweak and customize and beautify this Prometheus dashboard to make this demo the ultimate? So I could, do you really want to play that game with Nomad? That'd be pretty awesome, right?
It would be very bold.
Well, this is a great community office hours. Show up, make the UI team do stuff. I love this.
Yeah.
I was afraid we were going to have to talk about CSI, of which I know nothing.
Me too.
But yeah, cool. What do we got?
We got more UI questions.
Awesome.
Actually, like there's a theme this time. I probably should have looked beforehand, but yeah. So the next one coming up is, can I filter UI by last execution state? So C jobs that most recently failed or C jobs that most recently were successful, similar to the Terraform cloud filters. Yeah,
you can't today. We have a new, that may actually be part of the ongoing search. So one of the nicest, well, my favorite new UI feature in Nomad 0.12 is the support for scaling, job scaling, and the support for pulling the information from the Nomad auto scaler is put in there to see the scaling history. I think it's great because it means that we can spend a little less time in Prometheus or our demos and a little more time in the Nomad UI. But one of the other major features that people who are not me are interested in Nomad 0.12 for the UI is global search. So you can go into the UI and you can type stuff in, and it allows you to more easily find stuff instead of clicking through the pagination or whatever you're doing now to find the stuff you're looking for in a very large Nomad cluster. My understanding is that additional features on top of global support, like filtering, like you would used to do in Inbox or something, for label, colon, whatever. I think that sort of stuff is on the roadmap. But generally, the question was explicitly about, how do I do a search or a filter to find the thing that I'm looking for, like the last failed evaluation? The general theme of the UI, some of the UI work that's ongoing, is to make it easy to do that, see that sort of stuff without having to come up with custom filters and stuff, just to be able to have views in the UI that elevate this information, the important information to you. That's the stuff they're working on, one of the things they're working on right now. So I'm just going to roll that into the previous question, which comes up over. But yeah, these sorts of use cases, that specific use case, if that's a use case that's important to you, file it in GitHub if it's not already filed, and it may be already filed. and that'll go onto the list as something that people care about. And if that's an issue you care about, go find that issue and vote it up, because we look at that sort of stuff. If we see an issue and we think this is not a very big deal, this is a minor burr, it's just a rough spot, but then it's got 27 thumbs up inside of GitHub, or 1,000 thumbs up inside of GitHub, whatever, we do notice that, and we're like, well, crap, we really should consider putting that in there. So
I think it's worth just pointing out that we, like as the development team, don't necessarily run into the same pain points as people running large scale clusters. Because we usually run clusters of size 1, maybe 3 or 5.
Yeah.
So we don't see the same things that you might see on a production environment.
And when we are interacting with production environments, so when we're doing support or helping out support, when a customer with a support contract has an issue, we're still not, we're not sitting at the computer, we're not holding the mouse, clicking stuff. We hit the API and we dump everything, and then we look at it offline using scripts and tools. So it's still a completely different experience than the regular day-to-day operator experience of looking at stuff, one job at a time using a mouse.
So that sounds like a rephrase of, if you're an operator and you're using this and you're running into these pain points, please, please, please go make a GitHub issue or vote up the relevant ones so that we can kind of get that direct lens into what you need.
Mm-hmm. The UI team is like Santa Claus. You just tell them what you want, and if you're good, maybe they'll give it to you. I don't know. Maybe it's not like Santa Claus. I don't know how Santa works.
Does anybody? Santa's a mystery.
I just know how the UI team works. They show up, they give us awesome things, and they just keep doing that, and we feed them.
So the next question coming up is not UI. It's about the CLI. I know. It is what is the CLI way to determine if a batch job has been successful or not? Not successful enough, successful or not. I just kind of bumbled my way through that. Is there some simple Nomad command line way, or possibly a curl output such as JSON to JQ to result?
Yeah, if you look at the status on the allocation, so when you run the job, the scheduler creates an evaluation, which eventually results in the creation of allocations. That's your job running, right? When the allocation for a batch job is done, it's going to be dead. But you can look and see whether it was dead failed or dead successful. And that's available in the CLI in the human readable format. And then some of the CLI things like job status show you 50 things. You think job status is making a call to get the status of the job, but it's actually making like 12 calls against the REST API to see the latest deployment, all of the allocations, all the evaluations, this status, maybe some information about the node, whatever, right? But many of the specific UI calls, like what is the status of this allocation? That was one API call. And most of the ones that are just one API call will also have a flag just to do -JSON or -verbose. It varies from command to command, which will actually give you the JSON output that allow you, if you don't want to have to, grep a line from the UI output, if you just want to get information like that, you can actually do that. You can just say -JSON or -verbose, pipe it into JQ, pull off the field that you want. Bob's your uncle. So, but yeah, the answer to that is use the UI to get the information about the most recent allocation for that batch job. If it's a batch job that just ran 5, if you haven't been hitting it over and over again trying to get it to work, you should just be able to find the most recent one. Or the most recent evaluation will have a list of allocations, and those allocations you can get their status and find out whether they died happy or died angry. And of course, this is complicated if it's not done yet either, because if it died angry, they come back as ghosts, rescheduled allocations. And so, this is easy to do when everything's done and in a steady state. If it's not in a steady state, if it's still ongoing, if the job isn't actually stopped, if it's being rescheduled, then you need to be able to handle that. I mean, the scheduler is doing things. You have to be able to handle that it's doing things. But yeah, you can do it with CLI. I like HTTP Pi. I don't know how you pronounce it. I started using that a couple of years ago, so I like that. I use that for a lot of stuff. That and Xargs and JQ can get you pretty much everything you need. But But if you have MTLS set up on your cluster, the CLI, the ability to use the Nomad CLI, which can handle the authentication and all that, and then use the -JSON or -verbose flags to be able to get out the raw stuff that you can then work with and pipe back into the CLI. That's your friend. And then so just use that. And if you find a command in the ULI, in the CLI that doesn't have -JSON or -verbose, or there's something that you really want to do that's easy, via curl and not so easy via the CLI, file an issue, ask. We'll put the UI team on it. No, we'll handle it.
Next week will be the ghosts of Chris Baker.
Next week's community office hours will be a rebuttal by the UI team.
We're not taking any new questions. We're just debunking old ones. Oh, geez. I'm still losing it a bit about the ghost comment. I don't know why. I just like cracking up.
So when allocations return.
I don't want that ever.
Nope.
Oh, man. Okay. So one of the questions we got in YouTube chat was, do we have any words of wisdom on how to get jobs like Prometheus, which read into the console catalog to work over TLS? I'm finding it to be a pileup of problems, and all examples I can find use HTTP.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
Are you talking about running the Prometheus agent and then trying to get that to connect to console to get at the catalog, all inside like a Nomad bridge networking task group? Is that the question?
I can repeat the question. Sorry, I was like, yes, I can. And then you continued. I was like, oh, maybe I don't need to. Oh, yes, I can. It's any words of wisdom on how to get jobs like Prometheus, which read into the console catalog to work over TLS. So it looks like anything reading the console catalog to work over TLS. And then there's an amendment in chat that says, particularly when using the Docker driver.
So
I feel like since they said it works with HTTP, it's not the bridge networking thing. It's a matter of actually setting up your task with the certificates necessary to make the TLS connection to console. The answer is we don't automate that from the Nomad side in the slightest. I think what you probably end up doing is using a template stanza to get certificates for console MTLS from somewhere and inject it into your task, and then have either a script or maybe Prometheus has flags or environment variables that you can just set to give it the knowledge that it needs to use those certs to connect to console.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to see whether there's a console connect hack to handle this as well. Whether you could have some sort of a terminating endpoint that allows it to talk to console, or some other console connect trick that allows it to talk to console.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and it's kind of like something that's been in the back of my head. It's like, it'd be so cool if console itself was just connect native, because by design right now, you would have to set up console as a console connect service, which is a little weird, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and console is registered.
Possible.
Yeah, console's in the catalog,
but
right?
It's in the catalog, but it's not connect enabled. So you'd have to like either launch a connect sidecar yourself or register a second service that is analogous to the first one, but connect enabled.
Yeah.
I've never actually tried doing this, but in theory, it should be no different than any other service. Console presents itself as a HTTP API, which is all good to go. So that'd be a fun experiment to do, actually.
Yeah, and we've been leaning pretty hard on telling people to file GitHub issues. That's an appropriate place to do for a feature request, or an annoyance. But we also have the mailing list, and we have the discuss forums. So this sounds like a great question for the mailing list, because the nice thing about the mailing list, I mean, the GitHub issues happen in public as well, right? But the nice thing about the mailing list is that we have so many people who have so much experience, so much expertise and mastery working with Nomad and customizing Nomad and making these sorts of things work, who are on the mailing list, including people from the Consul team, but mainly I'm talking about our customers and our community. So this sounds like an excellent question for the mailing list, because almost certainly somebody has had to deal with this before, and they tend to be pretty generous when answering these.
Just in general, architecture type questions are great for the mailing list. You'll get viewpoints from other people who have thought about it in different ways. It's a great, mailing is a great resource.
Also, it gives us a nice link that we can then drop into the Consul community.
Yep.
So we just need to all Zoom bomb the next Consul community office hours and bring them this question over and over.
I did not condone this, but sorry, Jono.
Jackie's not going to read the question. She's going to be like, "Oh no, it's a ghost."
Jackie's going to be like messaging the Consul DAs like, "I'm sorry, Chris is coming."
All right, what do we got?
Another question we got. Where did it go? I clicked the wrong thread and now it's gone forever. It's a fun question. So what is your favorite feature about Nomad that not a lot of people know about?
That not a lot of people know about?
Yes. Your favorite like obscure or like hipster feature that more people should know about that they just don't? Or trick.
And it's kind of counterintuitive to what I like about Nomad, which is that Nomad is very boring. Like, it's just the design and architecture of Nomad is kind of just what you would expect things to be. There's no surprise features. There's no arcane topology they have to deal with. It's just basic and I think intuitive to use. Maybe that's a feature.
So people who don't know Nomad, who are coming to Nomad, maybe from another orchestrator, or who have heard about containers and maybe haven't really, because not everybody's on cloud, not everybody's doing containers yet, right? People who are coming over, they hear about containers, they say, okay, well, we're going to start looking at containerizing our apps. And they look at the orchestrators and find that it's effectively, Nomad and Kubernetes. And a lot of people still don't, it's always interesting to see that a lot of people, one of their favorite features about Nomad, and the reason they use Nomad, is that it supports more than just running containers using the Docker daemon, right? So the support for raw executables, right? And so that's the favorite feature of a large number of people in the community, and one of the reasons why they use and love Nomad. But it's also one of the big surprising features when people come over to Nomad. Invariably, anytime I give a demo and I'm doing something wacky with a script, right? Invariably, there's always one or two comments in there. They're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that I could run a raw executable," or "I didn't know I could." So honestly, one of my favorite features, just for doing demos and when I'm experimenting, if I'm trying to test out a feature under development, or if I'm trying to reproduce a bug, I just using the template stanza to put a script into a job and then run that job, right? Just where everything that I need about the job is actually contained inside of the job. I did this in my Python demo, where I just put the Python script inside of the job file in the template stanza, and then ran it using the Python test driver. That ability to do that using the template stanza is one of my favorite. In fact, I would say my favorite Nomad feature is the template stanza.
Yeah, I was going to change my answer. The template stanza is like the feature that I don't think everybody knows about. That is absolutely powerful beyond your imagination. Like, it is literally Consul template baked into Nomad. If you've never used Consul template, it's just a tool that uses all of the features of Consul and generates it like a Go template file, I guess. And it's Turing complete. You can do just about everything in your job spec.
And when you start connecting with other stuff, like connected with the artifact stanza, you don't have to do everything in line. You can pull a template in the artifact stanza and then use Consul template to render it. You can do that. The new feature in 0.11 was task lifecycle. So you can have these init containers, is what they're called in Kubernetes land. We call them, we don't use that name because we have more flexibility with what we can do with them. But you can run them alongside as sidecars. You can run them early and then wait for them to stop before you start up your main task. So I had somebody asked for a Java hello world They were trying to test out the Java driver, one of the other developers the other day. They said, oh, does anybody have a hello world jar file? And I'm like, I can give you a hello world jar file, or I can give you a job spec, which has a pre-init task, which actually uses a template stanza to put the Java source there, builds it into a class, and then in the main task actually runs it using the Java test driver. And it was like a 20-line, job spec file that does that. It's 2 stages. One of them builds the jar. The other one actually runs the jar, runs the class file using the Java test driver. And it's all self-contained right there. And I thought that was pretty neat because Hello World in Java is almost 20 lines itself. So the template stanza, especially when combined with the other stuff, is pretty awesome. You know, the Vault stuff, the Vault backend in Nomad, the Nomad backend in Vault, the Nomad secrets engine in Vault is something that I think isn't, a lot of people know about it. It's right there on the webpage. But when you start combining that with the template stanza, I mean, you can write some incredible stuff. So
I think we have one last question, which I'm losing my voice and this is unfortunate. But the question is, would you recommend the usage of Nomad for a smaller scale production environment, such as 3 to 4 instances around 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of memory? And then they added that the documentation mentions the recommended requirements for operating Nomad clusters, but they're curious what the drawback on operating Nomad in a smaller scale environment is.
Nomad is wonderful. It's especially good for a smaller scale environment. I'm assuming in a small scale production environment, you don't have a team of 7 people to make sure your Kubernetes cluster stays running. So Nomad's great at small scale because it's easy to run. Many of us run it in our houses.
Yeah, I've got mine.
I run it.
Pi. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you run it in HA?
No.
Yeah. So, if you don't, if you can, you should run. You should always run Nomad, yes. A highly available configuration with multiple servers, because if you don't, you can lose your Nomad cluster, and then you lose all your jobs. And if you can afford the downtime associated with not being able to talk to your Nomad servers and then having to rebuild them and having to get your jobs loaded back out of them, do as you like, right? But you should always run it highly available. That's the downside of running at the small scale, is that you have to pay the tax of high availability. Having said that, we all run it on Raspberry Pis. We all run the Nomad server. And the Nomad server needs to have enough CPU to do the work that it needs to do. And it needs to have enough memory to store the state, because the state is stored in memory to be fast, to be scalable. However much CPU you need to do the work and however much memory you need to do the work is dependent upon the workload that you have. So if you don't have the Nomad server sized appropriately, you are going to have a bad time because it's not going to be able to do the work. And that often results in work piling up, and that's not a good time. So, it needs to be sized appropriately, which means it needs to be as big as it needs to be. And if you're bigger than you need to be, then yeah. So you're going to have to figure that out for your environment. But Nomad's wonderful at the small scale. It's just beautiful at the small scale. You just need to be able to, you have to be able to pay the tax associated with having the servers and really having the servers in a highly available configuration. But there's plenty of stuff out there on Discuss and plenty of stuff out there on the mailing list with people talking about how they run it. And I'm not going to endorse anything. I'm just going to let you go look and see how people successfully run Nomad and leave it at that. Because I don't want to have to come back and support something wacky a little later. But it's great at the small scale. It's great at the large scale because the scale is great in between. Nomad is wonderful at any scale.
I think we can squeeze one last question in that just came in. I looked at time. I'm like, maybe we can't.
I felt like that was such a great stopping point. No.
Yeah, that's a great stopping point.
Yeah.
Well, we can stop then.
No. One more question. Let's get the question.
One more.
Answered.
Yeah.
The very last question that came in is, how dangerous is it really to run servers and clients together on one machine?
Oh, see, that's the question that I was explicitly not speaking
to.
Okay, so that's why.
It really is not recommended for production use to run client and server together.
So what we can do is we can take that one and put it for the next one then, because I'm also getting a 60-second warning.
Oh, that's fine.
Oops.
Yes, they do 2 different things. So they do two different things. So you're mixing them together, and you want to be careful. Clients are pets. Servers are not pets, even with highly available concerns. So you don't want to, for example, you don't want to have them, if you put your clients into an auto scaling group because you want to be able to horizontally scale your auto cluster, you don't want your servers in that group. That's it. It's not that it's necessarily dangerous. It's not recommended. It's not supported, and it will prevent you from doing some of the things that you really do want to do. Like,
and I think most importantly, it does not fit in the Nomad security model. The Nomad clients, if they get compromised, really shouldn't affect the servers or the rest of your cluster at all.
Yeah,
If
that's
you run
an
them
excellent
together,
answer.
it's game over. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent answer. That's the best answer. It breaks down the security assumptions.
That was a really good, really fast answer. I'm impressed. So I guess with that, just to summarize, most of the last hour has been a lot of, if you have more detailed questions, you can feel free to bring them to us to get more kind of discourse on it, whether it's in Discuss or on the GitHub issues. If it's a feature request, bring that there. And if it's something that you're looking into and you want to get, please comment on it, give us likes, let us know that it's something that's important to you, because we have a bit of a different perspective when we're running Nomad. And yeah. So thank you so much, everyone that came out today. And thank you, Chris and Seth, for coming to answer the questions today. And I know there's a lot of UI today, but also UI hasn't messaged me yet, so either they
Look
haven't
forward
seen
to
this
hearing
or
from them next time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Good time.
Bye.
I don't actually have the end live.